Hi friends, this is Johnny Young, and I want to talk to you about some behind the scenes, inside game of cybersecurity, the things they're not going to really teach you in boot camp because they just don't have the time. And we're going to really go over it in this series. This is just the overview, but every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to jump into one topic or another, and we'll go over some right now and kind of discuss them and see what we got here. First one I'll talk about is what will happen when you graduate from boot camp, you get your job, you're going to find yourself in rooms like this, and you're going to be doing manager and team updates. We're going to talk about requests for proposals and what is your part in that. Of course, team budgeting concerns, they're not going to really talk to you too much about that in boot camp because how can they? They have no idea what they're going to be. But I had an $11 million budget that had hundreds of line items that I had to go over every month. Many of them were about purchase orders for hardware and software. And I'd also do campaigns to roll these out, because just buying them is only part of the issue. After that, you've got to roll them out to the different groups that need them, and from there, implement them. Then we're going to talk about manufacturer support for the hardware and the software. That's not something they're really going to discuss in the boot camp because they're going to assume that all that stuff is covered. Well, I'll let you know right now that that can slip through the cracks at any company, along with licensing agreements. Say you have a issue that came up, you call the vendor and they won't even talk to you because your licensing agreement is out of date, or you don't have manufacturer's support for that hardware, software, and you're going to have to do a tap dance to make that happen. It really sucks. That's all I can say. I've been in that situation a few times, and it's quite a nasty surprise. When you're in these little rooms too, you also talk about team project assignments, and then also what's known as postmortems. Postmortems are what went right, but unfortunately things will go wrong in a project too, so you're going to have to deal with that, and that's definitely not one of the fun things that you're going to have to talk about, but you will have to go over them. Then the next thing we'll dive into on some smaller things are the department disaster recovery plans, meaning for your department or your division, because when I was at IBM, our division was pretty large, and we'd have to go over a disaster recovery for the whole division. And what about department service level agreements? They may or may not touch on service level agreements in boot camp, but you're going to have a piece of it. Now, when I was doing it, and I'll explain what a service level agreement also in these discussions, but I didn't really care too much about the metrics of a service level agreement until I signed off on my first one, and I realized millions of dollars were hanging on them, and if there was downtime of a certain amount, that my company was going to get penalized or my department was going to get penalized. So it definitely put in a different perspective for me than it had been. You're going to have to get involved with those kind of heavily, because the manager, they may be the ones that are signing off on it, but they are going to need your input. Then also we'll talk about your annual performance review. Everybody hates that. I hated that as a staff member, employee. I hated it even worse when I was a manager. I had over 30 direct reports. And if all of those annual reviews are coming at the same time, it can be a real hell week. There's also places where they have it that it's staggered, that you do the annual review based on when the employee was hired. So there's spaced out a little more over the year. That's definitely manageable. But then we're going to go up to the next level. What are you going to discuss in the bigger rooms that you go into, where you have basically cross-team stuff that's going on? Now this room that we're looking at here, that's, I'd say, a medium-sized one. I've been in situations where we've had 40 or 50 people discussing things like building relocations, data center moves, the data center layout, very specific. If you work on something and it's put in the wrong place, then the repercussions could last for a long time on how is it going to be undone, the mistakes. Another thing is new site construction. That is a big part of growing companies. What happens when you're building a data center from scratch? You're also going to talk about large cross-team project assignments, large project post-mortems among the teams. You're going to talk about meetings with executives. You might have meetings with the executives in there where they hash out what they want from your group, or you're presenting in an RFP what your findings are to the executives, or you're going to talk about what your design is for the network. I'll dive into that. Each one of these will take up a whole segment just on each one of these particular items that I'm talking about. Now, there's no way possible that they're even going to begin to delve into those in a boot camp or school, because every situation in their minds is going to be different. They are more concerned with giving you the tools to learn about how to protect the edge, how to protect the network design on a lower level, server admin, stuff like that. But when you get into the real world, it's totally different, because you're going to have to talk about it when the chips are down and the money is on the line. So you're going to have to talk about your department or your division objectives, the company objectives. You'll find yourself in a giant room or in a town hall with everybody if it's virtual, and you'll talk about what the company objectives are and how you might be all depending on a bonus that comes from the company's meeting its goals. So you'll also have meetings in these rooms with the cross-team peers that you might have when you're working on those big projects. Of course, as I said, you'll talk about interdepartmental SLAs. Say you're on a network and you have an SLA with server teams that are protecting servers that have thousands of people on there writing software, and they're racing towards a deadline. But if you have any sort of downtime, the metrics are that you have to pay money for it. And where does that money come from? It'll come out of your department budget and go into theirs. And that has a giant effect on it. And that's not something that people know too much about. We'll also talk about any emergency situations that might come up. And you've got to always remember that behind the scenes, executives, they're going to make these decisions based on your technical input, because their own knowledge is very limited. They haven't been working day to day on anything technical. It could be in decades. It's definitely going to be in months or years for most of them, and they're going to need to have you break everything down. So whatever you tell them is the way things are going to go, but you're going to find out that they have a budget range in mind of what your design should come in at. It could be based on, I don't know what it's based on a lot of times. It could be based on what they need it to come in on. So you're going to have to adjust your design based on what their budget is. Now, the funny thing is, you only get to do your work after the meetings, the briefings, and the role assignments are done. So you may be in meetings for 6 or 7 hours in the day. When are you going to get your work done that you were assigned in these meetings? That was always a dilemma for me. It was always a dilemma for the people that I worked with. Well, that's why in IT and cybersecurity, you work these incredible hours sometimes. It's not just knowing all of the technical stuff. You've got to be able to manage your time well. You've got to be able to deliver on project milestones with project deadlines that are attached. So that's all really important stuff, that you get it done when it's assigned to you, when you were told that it needs to be done, and that it's under budget. So you're getting all these update meetings that are coming your way. You may spend your whole day in meetings, and then you'll spend your night working on the projects. It could be kind of frustrating, I know, but that's something that they probably won't be telling you too much about in boot camps or in school, but that's just the real world. Now, I'll put the emphasis where it needs to be on certain things. You may have heard of change management. Well, actually, it should be called change control. I'll go into what the difference is between change management and change control, but change management is on the corporate level where they want to change the corporate culture. Change control is the move, adds, and changes that you're going to be involved with. Problem management is something that is often confused with change control when there is a situation that comes up and people don't know whether to follow the change control policies or the problem management processes, and I'll explain the differences and what you need to do to make sure you're successful there. I'll talk about all those policies, processes, and procedures because someone's writing them. You're going to have to know them. You might even be the person writing them, or you may be giving some detail to them, because I've worked on policies where they've had teams writing these up and they've been in their ivory towers, but they will tell me something like, you need to lock down these files on a Linux server and give it certain permission, and those files don't even exist anymore. So how do you do that, especially if you're trying to be compliant and you're going into an audit and the auditor is expecting you to show proofs that you have these files locked down and they don't exist? So you're going to have to deal with the people that are writing these policies and explain to them that they're going to have to change that. So it's just another thing that can come up where you spend hours working on policies with these people. Now, compliance duties, that's really the core of what you'll be doing. You're going to not only need to make your network or your servers or whatever the security operations center or network operations centers are monitoring, but you're going to have to remain compliant, because you may be compliant today, but what tells you about tomorrow? Nothing. You may not be compliant tomorrow. So that's why the auditing is so important. You're going to face, as you get up there in, I guess, the levels, just like a PhD, you're going to have to defend against auditing teams your compliance status and your proofs. And I'll explain all the ways and how that affects you and how that works. And it can get very confusing. It took me a while to do it, but I did it for many, many years, so I know exactly what to do. Retention of evidence, proofs, that's so important. Has anyone ever talked to you about the overwhelming volume of exploits? It seems so clean and simple when you read about them, but when they come in by the thousands and you're patching servers every day or every couple days, it just can become mind-numbing. So you need to really understand about how to deal with the pressure, administer self-care and mindfulness. I didn't learn about meditation until I was late in my career. And there's so many people that were like me that you just feel pressure all the time. And I've seen so many people burn out. You can burn out for the month, you can burn out for the year, you can burn out for your career. So, I know exactly what that feels like, and I want to help everyone understand the tools that you need to be able to avoid something like burnout, because it can take you down. You could be the best technician in the world, and yet you can experience burnout, and it just is one of the worst things that can occur. So I'm going to go into that, as well as so many other things I didn't even put on the list, like what happens when your company is acquired? Where do you fit in there? What's your role? What about when your company is doing the acquiring? What happens if you're acquiring a company that's hostile and they're doing things like hiding network segments so you don't know about it, or they have servers that they're not even telling you about it, and you're doing a cutover and they're servers with obsolete operating systems, or outsourcing. You're in the middle of working, and then suddenly you're called upon to basically come up with a plan to outsource yourself. So there's all kinds of different things that I'm going to be going into that I guarantee you're not going to really come across that much. So this is the inside game of corporate cybersecurity, behind the curtain, stuff that took me years and years to understand. I hope that I'll be able to help you guys and shorten your learning curve so that you won't be stressed. You'll have those eureka moments a lot quicker than I did, because it took me sometimes a long time to put these together. So I hope this works out well for you and you'll be able to attend these series. It's Johnny Young saying thank you so much and take care. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.